Good day, everybody. Dave Walker here again with the Beta SMB Institute. And in our series that we promised with our partner Accenture, we're really trying to draw out kind of forming the basis of a new center of excellence we're trying to establish in the business to small business space. Some topics that we thought were very, very relevant. Now, some of them are research-based and really kind of are expansive descriptions of research that Accenture has recently done in the SMB space. Some of them are principles that kind of flow from that research, things to pay attention to. This one actually is one I think is very important as somebody who's been doing marketing for 35 plus years, and it's on the topic of segmentation. And before you roll your eyes and say, if I hear one more thing about segmentation, I'm going to put a gun in my mouth. It is kind of a topic that frankly, as marketers, at least I've been revisiting for 35 plus years, depending in the different customer group that I'm trying to go after, whether it's business or consumer or narrow niches of a target audience. It's always an important consideration. And sometimes I think we lose sight of the basic and most important principles of segmentation. And particularly now, how has segmentation changed? How has our approach to segmentation changed? Could not possibly be more important in a market space of over 25 million small businesses who all believe they are snowflakes, that there is nothing else like them in the universe, and are perpetually saying that we, as those who sell to them, don't understand them. So we're going to try to get to the solution to that in the form of how we approach segmentation. And to join me in this conversation are first and foremost my good friend Stephanie Gorski, who's a manager director of small business practice at Accenture. Good morning, Stephanie.
Good morning. It is a pleasure being here again. And it is, I love what you said. This is a topic that should be revisited constantly. So Jing and I are super excited to spend time with you on this today.
Right. And speaking of Jing, a new face to our community, and a really welcome one. Jing Brewer, welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited about this topic. Stephanie and I, we are both just incredibly geeky and nerdy about this. So we're looking forward to share our thoughts, what we have seen, and then what we can improve.
Right. I should actually have a jar next to my laptop that has a place where we can slip money into. Every time we geek out and nerd out, we can just kind of slip money into it, because I'm sure we'll be wealthy at the end of it. Jing, why don't you start out by just giving a quick background on yourself, what you do in the Accenture consulting world, and then Stephanie, turn it over to you, and we'll start talking on the topic.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So as we know, my name is Jing Brewer. I am a director of product within Accenture. And you might ask, wait a minute, Accenture is a service company. Why do you have products? Why do you have a director of product? The reason is because we believe that everything that we bring to our clients requires a foundational technology, not only understanding, which we have brought many, many times before, but also assets and capabilities that we can support our clients. So my responsibility is primarily focused on how to bring AI capabilities and technology to support our clients. So segmentation is one of the space that, and one of the areas that AI can do tremendous amount of good. And we're looking forward to share what we have seen today.
Awesome. And Steph, just by way of quick background for yourself.
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, Dave, I'm a managing director in our strategy practice. I'm also the global lead for strategy for small and medium-sized businesses. And again, like Jing, you think about Accenture and you're like, why do we care about small and medium-sized businesses? Well, many of the companies we support, enterprise companies, spend most of their time thinking about small and medium-sized businesses. And in order to support them effectively and support SMBs really effectively, we need to know how to engage, how to segment, how to really make sure we are thinking about supporting SMBs in a personalized way so we can advise our enterprise clients in the best way possible. So Jing and I, again, nerding out, have spent most of the last 3+ years spending time really diving into how can we support SMBs more holistically. And I've been looking at the SMB market for the last 5+ years. So really excited to spend time pushing the envelope more, especially around segmentation.
So I've got you slightly beat on number of years. I started working in the small business space, selling into the small business space in 2011. building BizHive. And what I recall even in 2011 was an almost constant argument on what is a small business, what is an SMB. What is an SMB, Steph, from your perspective? And you're really looking globally at what defines an SMB.
So it's interesting, and I just did, I shared some of this with you yesterday, a global study actually on small, medium-sized businesses, and there's a lot of similarities globally. But one of the strongest ways that we look at SMBs is actually around the number of employees. Everyone's done it different ways, and Jing and I are going to hit on heavily on one of the ways many enterprises do it today is actually based on the revenue a company spends with an enterprise. But I mentioned this yesterday, and it's probably my favorite fun fact. We've worked with many enterprise clients that consider Accenture a small and medium-sized business because Accenture doesn't spend enough revenue with those clients. And quite frankly, if you treat Accenture like a small and medium-sized business, you're never going to get to them to spend more with you. So it's critical that you look at small and medium-sized businesses in the way that they operate, their journey, how they act. And one of the best indicators of that is just based on the number of employees. We see a strong difference between those that have, we usually go between 2 and 500 and then sub-segment within that. And those that have over 500 employees usually act more like enterprises. They have more of a structure, an operating model. The technology looks different. Their processes look different. Who's making the decision around buying products or services looks different. So that's how we start segmenting. But from there, there's a number of different layers, and we're going to talk a lot about layered segmentation. Number of different layers we look at for SMBs.
And you're not suggesting that the number of employees is some form of proxy for purchase behavior or need or any other kind of demographic. It's just simply a good way of defining the S in SMB.
Correct. And it's a way to start, right? It's a way to start thinking about what that SMB population looks like and then segment further from there. There are some similarities, though, if you compare those size of employees versus the rest of the population of companies, there are some similarities on purchase behavior. But quite frankly, I mean, I've mentioned this yesterday, and it's a fact that I feel very strongly about. I support a lot of enterprise companies. There's no way that I would ever assume they all act the same or look the same based on the number of employees they have. If they're all 10,000 and above, I would treat them all specific to both the combination of size, but also where they are and how old they are in their journey. Also what they've implemented recently. I would do a lot more on top of that. So it's kind of amazing that many enterprise companies think they can treat all SMBs the same today. Without further, go for it.
And Stephanie, I think that's an amazing point. And this is the reason why, enterprises, they have account managers for other enterprises so that you have people that are specifically focusing on the account and understanding and learning about that account. But that is impossible to do when you have so many small, medium businesses that you have to also treat in a personalized way. So I think that's where a lot of the challenges around how to balance the need to have the personalization and understanding the small, medium businesses, but you just don't have enough people to do that one-to-one relationship building. And I think that's definitely the challenge that we have heard and seen a lot from our clients.
And do you think that is it kind of the secret hope of most of the management of very large corporations selling to small business that also sell to the Fortune 1000? Do you find that it's their secret hope that they could just take what they did to the Fortune 1000 and basically just break it apart and use that, wholesale, whole cloth to sell to SMBs?
100%. I mean, it's the biggest complaint we hear nonstop. So it's not only do they want to transition everything they've done to those Fortune 1000 to the SMBs, they also want to do it through the same channels, same engagement model, same marketing messaging. It just doesn't work. It's fundamentally, you're not going to see the uptick in SMB adoption in the way that you need to. And note, I said adoption, not purchase, really, truly adoption and continual engagement if you end up doing that. And we've seen that time and time again in all of our research and also through all of our discussions and interviews with SMBs. It just doesn't work. And it's a waste of time, quite frankly. It's time.
And expand on that in a little bit. You've done a great job over the last 18 months of fielding a number of different research initiatives that have demonstrated over and over and over again that small businesses do not feel understood by large enterprises. Does that, first and foremost, talk a little bit about that gap in what we perceive we're doing such a great job at as best SMB brands, and what the small businesses are actually sensing, and is that lack of understanding or appreciation that small businesses feel, is that the single greatest motivator to get your segmentation right?
Yeah, I don't think it's the single greatest motivator. I actually think building relationship and building trust and some of the other things we've been talking about are really motivators too as well. But one of you're spot on. Small, medium-sized businesses don't feel like they're listened to, heard, or cared about. So a combination of one, understanding what their goals are. The assumption of so many enterprise companies is that the goal of an SMB is just to grow. The number of SMBs that I've heard on this journey really want to either maintain or to continue to think about expanding, but not growing necessarily in revenue, but expanding product set. Doesn't mean natural growth right away. All of those pieces, a lot of the positioning that enterprises is doing today is really just about, you want to grow and here's how fast you can grow. I spoke specifically with, actually Jing and I both did, with a services SMB who's just like, I am happy with where I'm at. If I grow anymore, it's going to be too overwhelming. And quite frankly, I'm not going to have the balance between my personal life and my professional life. So when everyone markets to me about growth, because I've already grown so much, it's kind of showing they don't understand me. And we hear that time and time again. So it's about knowing the SMB, it's about understanding where they're at, and really making sure you're supporting them effectively and where they want to go versus where you want them to go. A lot of what SMBs feel like today is enterprises are pushing what they want versus what really the SMB community wants.
Years ago at BizHive, we did some research into, frankly, the life stage of different small business as a proxy or an indicator of what their needs were. And to make a long story short, the third stage that we identified of small businesses was when they had passed actually their growth phase. They were mature, they were settled in, they basically had their place firmly fixed, their market share firmly fixed, and they frankly were not that interested in growth. And they really, frankly, were somewhat averse to it. And that's fascinating because that was also the group that had the most money to spend. They had the biggest bank accounts, the biggest savings accounts. And so they were very attractive from the standpoint of, wow, those look like people who would be great candidates for buying a big new server stack. And the short answer was they didn't want it. They just didn't need it. So at Jing, as you really kind of think about the approach of a segmentation model that you would use in this space, in this business to small business space, can you kind of lay out what are the good things to have, and what are the gaps? What are the mistakes that are most frequently made in building segmentation models targeting small business?
Yeah, some of the common mistake that we have seen is either our clients are going very, very high level, which is how much has a business spent with me, like to what Stephanie has mentioned, or they go to the extreme, which is I need to build 15,000 personas and so that I can fully understand my businesses. Both of these are not the best option to go about it. The high level, you're going to miss a lot of signals and cues, as what Stephanie, and your example as well that you mentioned. And when you go into that really detailed persona level, where you can also be challenged with just amount of details. And again, the idea of having segmentation is so that you have a strategic way of grouping your customer bases so that you can offer the right treatment. Because at the end of the day, it's the action that drives the trust, the relationship, the understanding. And that's the reason why segmentation is so important, is because you do not have the luxury to have that one-on-one relationship. And therefore, you need to rely on a strategy to really build that understanding so that you can have meaningful engagement and treatment. So this is where we wanted to really caution businesses or enterprise to either go to the high level, how much have you spent with me? So Accenture is now at SMB, or that persona level where you can build this fantastic, structure and framework, but it's hard to use. So this is where we believe that what's really ideal is this kind of middle ground, which start small and gradually build upon. And because at the end of the day, you could get to that persona level and that could be really helpful, but you're to build upon a foundation that allow you to be able to take something small and continue to grow and grow in terms of your relationship and understanding with your SMBs. And then finally, you can get to that nirvana state, which is, oh, I have just this wonderful understanding of my SMB community. So that would be, what I would say the common mistake is that you either go so high level, you go so detail level that you're kind of missing the middle.
So let's geek out a little bit here. So the data, let's start from the premise that data is the best source of really beginning at least the creation of a segmentation model. Do you believe that in the same sort of way you described, hey, there's two extremes that are used. There are those who build segmentation models on purely internal data. In other words, their own sales data. And they use that, almost 100% to basically say, well, here's our existing customers. So therefore, all of our future customers must look like this and must be segmented like our current sales file is segmented. There's others that use a variety of, and there's certainly some extremely large and extremely profitable companies out there who provide external streams of data to kind of establish segmentation. Where do you land as far as the use of those two different kinds of data sources, Jing? I mean, do you basically say, hey, look, it is a balance. You can't really do one extreme or the other, or is it no, really your internal data is better? Where do you land?
It's both. It's actually both. The reason is because to exactly what you said, Dave, right? The first party data allow you to understand what has happened. And then what can add to that is having external data sources that allow you to predict what may be happening in the future. Let me give you an example. So let's say if you, even for your existing customers, for example, this existing customer has been a wonderful customer, and we can see their behavior from the first party data that there's certain type of things that they always do. But then suddenly you realize that they stop doing certain things. If you only rely on first party data, then you will have a hard time understanding why they have stopped. You just know that they have stopped. But this is where using third party data and manufacturer data allows us to have signals, external signals that allows us to see that, hey, the reason this customer has changed the behavior is because they recently just had a mass restructure. And there's a lot of news articles about the mass restructuring. So those are the type of things that allows us to really understand the different layers of segmentation, which Stephanie alluded to in the earlier. And this is where we believe that the segmentation foundationally starts with the firmographic, understanding about the SMB, number of employees, how long they've been in business, where they're located, how many offices, what industry they're in, basically the basic understanding of this particular business. Then that's when you move up the stack. And this is where we believe that based on our research, and Stephanie, definitely feel free to chime in, based on our research, we realized that one of the indicator, which is digital maturity, that really drives different behaviors of how SMBs want to be engaged, how they want it to be treated. So therefore, we layered the second segmentation with digital maturity signals. And what do I mean by those signals are things like, are they using certain type of technology? Are they involved in certain type of community? And that really gives us understanding of what kind of digital maturity a certain business may have. And then the final level is what we say the mindset. So this is where, as we mentioned earlier, maybe certain businesses, they're not in that growth mindset. They may be in a maintain or sustaining, or something that allows us to really understand the behavior and predict what may be the needs and wants of the business. So an example of that will be, let's say we can understand if a business is hiring. So we can get things like jobs opening or closing and compare the months from the previous months so that we can understand a certain type of behavior in terms of growth. So these are the three is basically what we call it like the segmentation layer cake that allows us to really start to understand and help our clients to understand how to really engage and create the right treatments.
Well, I love the visual of a layer cake because it's horizontal, not vertical. And I think the way that all of us were taught way back in the old days of how to do segmentation was in the form of columns. It's basically like, here's column A, here's segment A, here's column B, segment B, and really dividing it more horizontally and or vertically rather. And what you're talking about is really, it's a building process starting at the different columns of firmographic or demographic information. Then there's the next layer, which is again another series of, and you all, how do you describe what are the component segments within digital maturity? What are the labels that you put on those segments within digital maturity?
Oh, that's the fun part. And this is where it depends on the client, right? So let's say if a company that's in the telco space and you wanted to understand if someone is likely to purchase, a high-speed internet, for example. Sorry, I'm just making things up here. But what allows us to understand is that a certain segment, they may be more techy, for example, right? And they need higher bandwidth than maybe those that are using internet more of a casual sense. So it really depends on the industry, the type of clients. And what we can do is that we can start to putting the different types of label or segment naming, and we can make it as interesting and as fun as we want. And I think this is where the variability of clients to clients, industry to industry will come into play. So not every single one will look the same, but the foundation is the same across all. First, you need to understand the business itself. Then you understand the digital maturity, whatever the form it is. For telco, maybe the usage of internet, but for advertising company, it may be the usage of different advertising tools and technologies, right? And then the last layer is around the mindset.
So Steph, is digital, that's a great answer, by the way, Jing. Is digital maturity a proxy for just what frankly digital products and services a small business has adopted, or is there something more to it?
I think you're critical in saying the word adopted, and Jing's mentioning usage. Like those words are differentiating factors to what we're saying, because
Okay.
the difference between actually having these products or buying these products and showing true adoption of it being ingrained in actually how you do your day-to-day business. So what we're really looking for in digital maturity, as Jing's mentioning, is actual continued usage of this product. These products or services really shows a comfort level and engagement model and really ingraining them in your day-to-day business. As these become a more core to SMB's processes, how they run their operations, how they're structured, we see a difference in how all these, I mean, we talked through it yesterday around how all these SMBs operate truly from a customer service and what they expect standpoint, how they actually expect to go to market from a view of how they engage with their own customers, and then also how they expect to discover and look for new products and services. So digital maturity is a critical layer for us on, quite frankly, I see more SMBs operate similarly based on their digital maturity levels than I even see within their own industry. So these two bottom layers of the layer cake that we're talking about, I think are critical to get right. However, it is an evolution, is what Jing's mentioning. You don't have to do it all at once. It's about building the right foundation and continuing to grow from there, and also having the flexibility to also adapt your segmentation model, because this world's going to continue to change.
Right.
And you want to make sure you have a continual grasp on it.
So this is kind of a jump ball for either or both of you, but does digital maturity in the way in which you've, I know, researched it, does it really manifest in differences between more than just simply purchase intent? In other words, it's really expansive into pretty much every way in which you interact with a small business. And if so, what are just as a for instance, what are some of the examples of where digital maturity really makes a big difference in how they want to be serviced after the sale, or how they want to be communicated with, or how much they're going to respond to social media interaction, et cetera, et cetera.
Spot on. You hit a number of those. And both of us have a lot of experience in this area. So Jing, jump in afterwards. But customer service, number one. Every company, Jing mentioned earlier, from an enterprise perspective, wants more scale with small, medium-sized businesses. One of the areas that they're concerned about scale the most is around customer service. And customer service, we were talking about this as well, is part of the sales experience. Even though it's post-adoption, it's about that continual selling and upselling and engagement model. And also because how much SMBs care about their peers too, it's leading to future sales. So customer service, we see more self-service engagement model with those that are more digitally mature and preference there than those are not. Also, it's about reevaluation. Those that are digitally mature, we don't see them churning as frequently because they're happy. They feel like the enterprise is meeting their needs. They feel like they're really thought of and the voice of what they're looking for is different. Also, how you engage with them, both from a service and a sale and a front pre-purchase engagement model. They want to be engaged with differently. They want that omni-channel outreach versus just one way that that company or that enterprise company is engaging. Love seeing text message come up, social media platforms with those that are digitally mature really want to engage in those quicker platforms, which actually, quite frankly, is easier for enterprise if they get them going. So there's a lot of positives as you build the digital maturity of SMBs or look at those most digitally mature and engaging with them in the right way, because it'll give enterprises some scale. Jing, anything else?
One thing that I would add, I mean, spot on, Stephanie. One thing that I would add as an example is that onboarding, for example, right? Because that oftentimes is the beginning of consumption and utilization and adoption, and these terms that we've been using. So imagine if you have a digitally mature companies that are, basically self-onboarding. It's like, I know exactly what I'm doing. I know why I'm using this platform or this product or services versus another that are struggling. Then what Stephanie mentioned, the ones that are struggling could have some support in terms of human touch so that they know how to best leverage the platform products or services that they're getting, and therefore it's going to increase the consumption, utilization, adoption, and then also that drives additional satisfaction and sharing with their peers. Just something as simple as how to provide the right service during onboarding can really change the way that your trust relationship and care between the enterprise and the SMBs.
So, okay, now let me ask this is a tough question. I'll put it in a visual setting. So picture yourself in a windowless conference room and you've been given the challenge sitting around with a team from a client company to kind of reinvent their segmentation model. And everybody is bought in to the 3-layer cake, and everybody kind of gets the starting point. And you've brought into the room, frankly, everything that composes a map, a genuine map. You've got boundaries, you've identified every state, every river, you've got it all mapped out of where things are. Then the question comes, but where should we go? How does segmentation, or how does the process of building a successful segmentation model, where should we go really enter the conversation, and how does it enter the conversation?
Oh, this is awesome. Accenture is all about taking actions. Having the strategy, having the insight is only a part of it, then how to use it. I would say there's so many places that you can go. And this is where the different organization will come in. So for marketing, they can use segmentation to start creating content and copywriting for that specific segmentation in terms of pre-sales and during sales. So an example is that a digitally immature or digitally growing SMB that are in the growth mindset, that copywriting, the messaging is going to be very different than those that are digitally mature and more of sustaining. So things like that is what drives better engagement in terms of messaging. So that's one example. Another example in the sales. So those who, again, using segmentation, you can drive different sales behaviors. So rather than using maybe an email to do an outreach, you might want to use LinkedIn, or you might want to use chat capabilities. So that allows the segmentation allows you to determine what kind of channel and what kind of messaging that you're, during the engagement that you're providing. And then services, which I think mentioned a few examples in our, last conversation. But the idea is that this is where, by having the segmentation, now you can start creating treatments across marketing, sales, and services and beyond. And these are just some of the examples of how you can use that.
Yeah, and Jing, you're spot on with that. And Dave, I was definitely thinking Jing's direction, but I'm even going to go a step before this. So, because what you set the tone for, and the view that you made me think of is like, okay, we have all this data. What do we do with, like, how do we actually turn it into segmentation too? So one is, I always recommend my clients first ground on the goal, right? Let's not get overwhelmed. Like, data's data and fantastic, and it's great to put into context, but first we got to ground on the goal. What is it you want? Like, what is your goal as a company when you're thinking about supporting SMBs? Mm-hmm. Okay, then now let's prioritize on getting all this data into a spot that is really, Jing and I do this all the time, of really a centralized source of truth. Mm-hmm. And it's about the right data though, right? So if you have gaps in your data, not to worry. Like, we may focus on 3 pieces of firmographics and that just be fine, based again on your goal and what you're driving and you're looking to do differently. I love what Jing said earlier, outside in too. Ingesting new data is so important, and creating that holistic model of both an inside out and an outside in perspective, and doing it again holistically. And then what Jing said, now that we have this data, we take action, and people use different visions or versions of the data, right? Marketing looks at it a different way, then sales, then the services org. But the piece that I would also say, and you had me thinking this earlier pretty heavily, because it's one of the biggest recommendations I give enterprise clients. So it's great that you have data today and you have an inside out perspective. Most companies don't really have good inside out. And what I mean by that is either they're not really keeping or cleansing or looking at their data effectively and making sure it is run well, but also they're not collecting data. So many of these enterprise companies work with so many SMBs daily, and they're not asking for feedback. They're not documenting when they do a service discussion around actually knowing more about the SMB. They're not asking 2 questions at the beginning of every service discussion about, okay, what state are you at? How are you feeling? What's your goal of your company? Even if they ask those 3 questions, that'd be phenomenal to give you a ton of data about the SMBs you already serve that can help you in this broader segmentation setting. So it's not just about what data you have, what do we have outside, but it's also about restructuring your programs internally to make sure you're collecting the effective data that will really make a difference to your program, and thinking about that wisely, because every question matters and it has to have an impact each time you ask for something.
Okay, so I really want to unpack that a little bit more, but I want to put a pin in that.
Yeah,
because sure. I want to project us back into that room, that windowless conference room. There's a CFO or a CFO representative who is sitting in the corner, who's looked at all of this and basically says in typical CFO fashion, so what? Why aren't we just simply going after the most digitally savvy, biggest bank account, most look like our current customer kind of customers? Why aren't we doing that? Because obviously that's where we're going to get the biggest bang for the buck. How do you respond to that?
Dave, I'm actually going to throw back at you something you said earlier. So you made the perfect statement. Most of the SMBs that are spending more really don't want to grow at this point in their career, right? And we're seeing that consistently. If companies double down, and the SMBs that are spending with them today, they are not the SMBs that are always thinking about future growth or expanding or spending more with those customers or those enterprise clients. So one, if you only focus on the funnel you have today, you're not growing. You're not growing as an enterprise player, just because those SMBs, you're not going to serve them correctly if they're going to push growth. And guess what? You're not going to retain them then. You're actually going to lose them in the process. Then, because you're doubling down with them. Then on top of it, that funnel, the rest of the SMBs, we're seeing so much accelerated growth to them becoming the next, the group in the area of the funnel you want to focus on. So you need to, and this gets into even better segmentation. We can start with machine learning, really identifying who those SMBs are that are going to be that next tier that you should focus on. So I'm pushing back all the time on those CFOs. or those people in the room that are like, I'm just going to focus on what I'm doing well today, because they're missing a huge piece of the pie. And also,
you just did a flying super flex on the CFO.
I know,
he's like in the corner drooling right now, just kind of shaking, going, "Sorry, I'll go back to my office."
There's so much opportunity, and it's
No, I couldn't agree more. And I think that the way I sometimes describe it is that, look, if you continue to pursue the success basically that you've created in the past, you will become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and really completely divorce yourself from the ability to open up new markets, new opportunities, and really, to your point, new growth. So, Jing, kind of back to you. You are obviously taking an extremely data-rich approach, but also kind of embracing the full operation of a large SMB brand, B2 SMB brand. What is the role of artificial intelligence and machine learning to make us, frankly, just more capable of dealing with the huge amount of fragmented sources and information pieces that we're going to have?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic question. And I also feel like you just answered my question or your own question. Where artificial intelligence and machine learning can really come in is the fact that we are generating more and more data today. And that amount of data that we have, in order to process by a human, it becomes much more challenging. So this is where using machine learning AI, we can really make sense of we call it the chaotic data space. And at the same time, you also see that the reason Stephanie and I are on this conversation is because Stephanie represents strategy, I'm represents AI. It really requires the combination of strategy, still human-led strategy, along with the data to bring the two together, which makes the perfect marriage in terms of coming up with segmentation. And as we mentioned earlier, segmentation is not just for the sake of coming up with, another insight, but segmentation is a strategy, is a digital strategy around how to have better engagement, how to have treatments that actually matters and makes sense. So to answer your question, where AI play is that it's a fantastic way for us to make sense of the world, but also requires strategy to be in there to help us, really identify how we go about it.
That's a great answer. And I would love to, boy, that could be a segment unto itself. I mean, I would love to have you back just to simply talk about the challenge that I hear, particularly from a lot of CMOs in their application of AI. I think they buy into the theoretical of, and frankly, the more abstract notion that AI could help them with a number of decision support issues that they have with this massive amount of data that you're describing. But I also think that it's like they're looking at a very complicated machine that they just simply don't know how to even put their hand on and actually apply. They can't figure out what the heck it's for and how they're going to actually use it. So I think, Jing, I'd love to have you back just to talk that linkage between strategy that you've set out, and then what I hear you saying is asking the question of, how can AI help me get to a better fact-based decision around this strategy, the decisions that I make around the strategy? Is that fair?
100%, 100%. And as a matter of fact, that's one of the hardest things about AI today is to understand how to apply it. Because the way that it's been talked about, it feels like it can do everything and anything, which is not true. And this is where we really need to apply the strategy and identify the right use cases to harvest the power of AI in the most effective, responsible, and beneficial way.
Absolutely. So Stephanie, back to that pin that we put in as kind of as we wrap up. So take it from that pin and expand a little bit, if you would, on kind of what you were summarizing there, which I think is so important.
So and I'm going back to the pin, I said a lot in that moment. So correct me if there's things that like I missed in what I'm saying. But I think there's a real opportunity. If we talk about segmentation overall, we've hit on a number of different things. We've hit on like how different you need to treat SMBs based on the segmentation model, how it can evolve over time, how you're building a foundation. Even just with Jing, when I was captivated by Jing saying, with AI, it's a journey. It's not a immediate impact of what you're doing, like immediate thing that you have to release all the transformation that you need in order to make this work. And what I'm really striving for when we talk to enterprises and work with them today, really striving them to understand is one, I'm also like thinking about the persona stuff, because I now tell people I don't want to even do personas with them because they're not even mature enough in their models yet to do that. But what we spend most of our time enterprises doing is saying, okay, how can we scale? How can we scale effectively with SMBs? How can we break out of our mold of here's the SMBs we support today. There's a broader set of SMBs we do want to support, but how do we treat them differently and not just reuse what we're doing? But how do we do that effectively and efficiently based on our current model? So it's really a tug of war right now between number of SMBs I need to support as an enterprise and how much resources support I actually have internally. And the beauty of this is you kind of hit it, and I'm unpacking everything right now and summarizing, but you hit it when you talked about the CFO. There's so much opportunity in the SMB space to really build a trusted relationship, gain more revenue just with the SMBs you have because of that, know where they are in the mindset, but also build a broader set of capabilities around the future of SMBs and what this looks like. We're doing some research that we are excited to share with you in the future, but about the SMBs that have been born out of this COVID age, which so many of us have kind of done side projects and different pieces and tested out the, ownership of a business type approach more than I ever thought was possible. And those SMBs are looking for guidance from enterprise and really excited to engage in the right way and know that they have to outsource some of the stuff they have to do. So with that being said, segmentation is the best way for everyone to work efficiently and effectively together. And that this become more of a symbiotic relationship instead of what I'm feeling today. And I know, Jing, you and I talk about this quite a bit, which is the push-pull. It's really more of a, okay, I'm pushing you to tell you what you need to meet my needs. And then enterprises are saying, well, I don't have the bandwidth, or I'm going to just try to make this work in whatever way I can possibly can. It's not that hard, actually.
Right.
To put it pretty bluntly, it's just about going back to even Jing's comment, using the data effectively, but also harnessing the strategy and being thoughtful about it. So I think this is the year to really simplify segmentation and being smart about how to support SMBs effectively. I know that doesn't quite hit everything we talked about the pin.
And I was a better summary than I could ever have possibly imagined. So, and Jing, you don't get to answer because that was just too good. You dropped the mic on us at that one. She just was like, okay, we're done
100%.
This has been absolutely fabulous, guys. And I think that this is an expansive conversation that continues, really, it is the substance of what we hope to do with Accenture in our loosely named Center of Excellence, but really just a hub for all of the thinking and frankly, all of the provocation behind the thinking in really trying to solve, I don't want to say once and for all, but do a much better job of solving for the huge gaps that still exist between small business customers and those enterprises that are trying to sell to them. And if you want or need more evidence of that, please go back and look at some of the research that Stephanie has presented over the course of the last 18 months now. And even the research that Stephanie presented as part of this this Tuesday morning, or Wednesday morning rather, of sessions that are back-to-back 4 sessions from Accenture. They're really covering some really key topics like this one, segmentation. And I think you'll see we have work to do. And let's harness all the energy that we had in the last 18 months as we watched our customer base in the form of small businesses go over a cliff. It's just the nicest way to put it. And, we managed to pull a lot of them back through a lot of the efforts that we collectively made as business to small business brands, but it's put us kind of now really kind of face to face with our small business customers, kind of grabbing them by the shoulders and they grabbing us by the shoulders and say, whew, we made it through that. now what are we going to do? Now what are we going to do to really make a better world for both of us? So that's what I hope is really part and parcel of what we're trying to do here. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Jen. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being now part of our community and such a great thought leader and contributor on that front.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And Stephanie, as always, wonderful to see you. Wonderful to talk to you. Thanks so much for doing this.
Awesome. These are the high points of my day. So I'm excited to spend more time with you over the course of the next year too.
All right. Thanks.